What happens when a television legend sits down for what should have been a simple, celebratory interview, only to find herself defending her life's work against accusations she never saw coming? You're about to witness one of the most unforgettable clashes in daytime television history. And trust me, you won't believe how this unfolds. Be sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment below, because this story gets absolutely wild. Marla Gibbs, the beloved actress who won hearts as Florence Johnston on The Jeffersons and Mary Jenkins on 27, walked into the studio that morning, expecting business as usual. At 92 years old, she had done hundreds of these interviews. She figured she'd seen it all. The producers had promised a warm conversation about her new memoir, a celebration of her groundbreaking roles in television history. Backstage, host Sherri greeted her warmly. The two shared laughter and pleasantries, Sherri praising Marla as a trailblazer who paved the way for so many women in entertainment. Everything seemed cordial, even affectionate, as they walked onto the set. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the incomparable Marla Gibbs," Sherri announced as the cameras rolled. The audience erupted in applause. Marla, elegant in a powder blue blazer and pearls, waved with that same radiant smile that had charmed generations of viewers. "Marla, it is such an honor to have you here," Sherri began. "I grew up watching you on The Jeffersons and 227. You were such an inspiration. Truly, you opened doors for us." "Thank you, sweetheart," Marla replied warmly. "It's wonderful to be here with you. I've followed your career, too, and I'm so proud of all you've done." The interview started smoothly, with questions about Marla's early years in Hollywood and the struggles of being a black actress in the 1970s. Marla shared stories of auditioning for The Jeffersons, never expecting her character Florence to become a cultural phenomenon. "When I first read for Florence, I thought it would just be a few episodes," she recalled. "But she had such spirit, such fire. She wasn't about to let anyone walk over her, and I think people connected with that strength." "Absolutely," Sherri agreed. But then her tone shifted. She leaned in. "And speaking of strength, I want to touch on something important. There's been debate recently about roles from that era, whether they perpetuated harmful stereotypes. Don't you think, looking back now, Florence played into some of those? The sharp-tongued maid, always serving a white family?" The audience fell quiet. Marla's expression tightened. She'd fielded questions like this before, but something in Sherri's tone made it clear. This wasn't going to be a gentle conversation. "Sherri, I think you're oversimplifying," Marla replied calmly, though steel edged her voice. "Florence wasn't just a maid. She was smart, witty, proud. She never let anyone diminish her worth. She was three-dimensional, not a caricature." "But she was still serving a white family," Sherri pressed. "Doesn't that send a problematic message, especially when representation was so scarce back then?" Marla sat taller in her chair. "If you watched the show, really watched it, you'd see Florence was often the smartest person in the room. She had the best lines. She drove the comedy, and she never once compromised her dignity. That character opened doors." "Opened doors for whom?" Sherri shot back, her voice sharp. "For executives who could pat themselves on the back for diversity while keeping black characters in traditional roles. For white audiences who laughed at the sassy maid without ever confronting real issues." The tension in the studio was electric. Marla's publicist shifted uncomfortably in the front row. This was no longer the celebratory interview they'd been promised. It was a confrontation. "I'm starting to wonder if you actually watched the shows you're criticizing," Marla said finally, her tone still composed but cutting now, the weight of her decades in the industry behind every word. "Because if you had, you'd know that Florence was revolutionary for her time. She was funny. She was smart. She was human. She wasn't a stereotype. She was a fully realized character." "Revolutionary," Sherri repeated, one brow arched. Really? A maid character was revolutionary? That single word, delivered with such casual dismissal, hit Marla like a physical blow. Here was a younger host, someone who claimed to admire her, reducing decades of work and cultural impact into something flat, something disposable. You clearly don't understand what it was like back then, Marla said, her voice steady but cracking at the edges. You don't understand what we were up against, what we had to overcome, or what those roles meant to people who had never seen themselves on television before. The studio lights seemed to burn hotter. What had begun as a warm interview was morphing into an interrogation, and Marla Gibbs was not about to let her legacy be written over. I understand perfectly well, Sherri countered, her voice rising. My grandmother was a domestic worker. My great-aunt cleaned white people's houses. So when I see Florence on television, making jokes while cleaning up after the Jeffersons, it hits differently for me. Marla's eyes flashed, part shock, part indignation. Then you should understand even better why Florence mattered, she said, leaning forward. Your grandmother, your great-aunt, they deserved to see themselves represented with dignity, with humor, with strength. That's exactly what Florence gave them. Sherri shook her head, gesturing emphatically. But was it really dignity? Or was it just making audiences comfortable with inequality? Making them laugh at the help, instead of asking why the help was necessary in the first place? The audience sat frozen. Some shifted in their seats, visibly uneasy as what was supposed to be a celebration now felt like a reckoning. Marla's publicist in the front row typed furiously into her phone, clearly scrambling for damage control. You're putting today's lens on yesterday's reality, Marla said, her voice firming with conviction. We worked with what we had. We took roles that could have been one-dimensional, and we made them human. We made them matter. Florence wasn't just comic relief. She was the heart of that show. The heart, Sherri repeated, incredulous. With all due respect, Marla, you were the hired help making jokes about your employers. How is that the heart of anything, except a system that needed black women to be entertaining while staying in their place? The words hung heavy in the air, sharp and unforgiving. Marla leaned back, studying Sherri with new eyes. This wasn't about television anymore. This felt personal, pointed, even hostile. Sherri, Marla said, her voice low and commanding. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Have you actually watched full episodes of The Jeffersons recently? Or are you basing this entire conversation on clips and other people's opinions? For the first time, Sherri hesitated. Just a beat, but Marla caught it. I've seen enough to form an opinion, Sherri said, defensive now. That's not what I asked you, Marla pressed. Have you watched the episodes? Have you seen the storylines where Florence stood up to George Jefferson, where she refused to be disrespected by anyone, black or white, where she had dreams, relationships, depth? Have you seen that? I don't need to watch every episode to know what she represented, Sherri snapped. Actually, you do, Marla shot back, her tone cutting through the silence. Because what you're doing right now is exactly what critics did back then. You're reducing a groundbreaking character to the shallowest possible interpretation. You're doing to Florence what racist critics tried to do. Diminish her to a stereotype. The words landed like a thunderclap. Sherri stiffened in her chair, the edge in her voice sharpening. Don't you dare try to flip this on me, she said, bristling. I'm asking legitimate questions about representation and the impact of images in media. That's not racist. That's responsible. Responsible? Marla repeated, her eyebrows rising. Is it responsible to tear down the work of pioneering black actresses without doing your homework first? Is it responsible to use your platform to diminish characters that meant everything to millions of people who finally saw themselves? Finally felt seen? The audience murmured now, the tension unbearable. The clash between two generations of black women, one defending a legacy, the other interrogating it, playing out in real time. "I'm not tearing anything down," Sherri insisted, leaning forward. "I'm having an honest conversation about how some of these old shows look through today's eyes." "No," Marla corrected, her voice gaining force. "You're not having a conversation. Conversations require listening. They require understanding context. What you're doing is lecturing me about my own career, my own choices, my own impact, without even bothering to understand what you're talking about." The audience was spellbound now, watching what felt less like an interview and more like a public reckoning. Some heads nodded firmly with Marla. Others leaned toward Sherri's framing, torn between respect for the icon and the weight of modern critique. "I understand more than you think I do," Sherri said sharply. "I understand that sometimes our ancestors had to take roles that weren't perfect because those were the only roles available. I understand compromise, but I also understand that we have to be honest about the impact of those compromises." "Ancestors?" Marla's voice dropped into a dangerous quiet. "Sherri, I'm sitting right here. I am not an ancestor. I am not some relic of a distant past. I am a living, breathing woman who made choices in my time, and those choices opened doors for women like you." "I never said you were a relic," Sherri backpedaled quickly, her tone softening for the first time. "You didn't have to say it," Marla replied, her eyes locked on her. "Your whole approach treats my work like an embarrassing chapter in Black television history that you have to explain away. Or worse, apologize for." "Well, let me be clear. I'm not apologizing. Not for Florence. Not for Mary Jenkins. I am proud of those women, proud of what they represented." "And what did they represent?" Sherri pressed, refusing to release her grip on the conversation. Marla turned deliberately toward the camera, her expression unshaken, as if speaking directly to the millions of viewers watching at home. "They represented women who refused to be invisible," she said, her voice ringing with quiet intensity. "They represented intelligence wrapped in humor. They represented dignity in the face of dismissal. They told the truth that working people, Black women, domestic workers, deserved to be seen as full human beings, with stories, with worth, with voices." "But they were still in service positions," Sherri pushed, her tone unrelenting. "And what exactly is wrong with service?" Marla shot back, her voice rising for the first time. "What's wrong with honest work? What's wrong with portraying characters who earn their living with dignity?" She leaned in, her eyes fierce. "My mother was a domestic worker. Are you suggesting her life, her dignity, her intelligence didn't matter because of her job?" The revelation sucked the air out of the studio. Sherri froze, visibly caught off guard. The audience fell into a silence so thick, it was almost oppressive. "That's not what I'm saying," Sherri murmured. "Then what are you saying?" Marla demanded, the steel in her tone undeniable. "Because from where I sit, it sounds like you're ashamed of working people. It sounds like you think service jobs are beneath dignity. It sounds like you've bought into the very classism Florence spent every episode tearing down." The tables had turned completely. Sherri, normally in total control of her stage, was now on the defensive. Marla Gibbs, elegant and commanding at 92, radiated the same quiet authority that had defined her most iconic roles. "I'm not ashamed of working people," Sherri said firmly, trying to claw back control. "I'm questioning whether those representations served our community well." Marla's laugh was short, incredulous. "Served our community well?" Sherri, Florence, and Mary were beloved by our community. People saw themselves in them. They laughed with them, not at them. They found strength in them. So I'll ask you, who are you speaking for when you dismiss that connection? Who, exactly, are you representing when you tell millions of viewers their joy, their pride, their laughter was somehow misplaced? Sherri shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her polished composure faltering. "I'm speaking for people who felt limited by those images, who felt like those were the only roles Black women were allowed." And I'm speaking," Marla cut in, her words sharp as a blade. "For the millions who felt seen for the very first time. For the domestic workers who finally saw a woman sharper than her employers. For the working mothers who watched Mary Jenkins juggle family and dreams. For every woman who saw her wit, her grit, her strength reflected back at her. That is representation," Sherri inhaled, as though preparing another retort. But Marla raised a hand slightly, her gaze never breaking. "Of course we deserved more," she said slowly, her tone measured, commanding. "And we fought for more, every single day on those sets. We fought for more depth, more humanity, more complexity. But you know what we didn't do?" She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "We didn't tear down the progress we were making while we fought for more." The audience erupted, applause breaking out in waves, cutting through the tension like a crack of thunder. "Intent doesn't matter when the impact is the same," Mara said, her voice low but unshakable. "You can dress it up as critique, you can call it conversation, but what you did was take the work that gave dignity to people who had none in the eyes of this country and treat it like a stain to be scrubbed away." Sherri swallowed hard, her hands tightening around her cue cards. "I was trying to push the conversation forward." "No," Mara countered, leaning in now, her presence commanding every inch of the stage. "You were trying to push me aside. You can't move forward by pretending the ground beneath you doesn't exist. Every role, every laugh, every moment of Florence and Mary Jenkins laid the brick. For you to sit here today, with your own talk show, and instead of honoring that foundation, you're standing on it and pointing fingers down at the women who built it." The audience let out a collective murmur, some nodding with Mara's words, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "I'm acknowledging progress," Sherri insisted, but her voice trembled, betraying the crack in her resolve. "Progress without respect is just arrogance," Mara said flatly. "You don't get to erase the sweat, the tears, the sacrifices of those who came before you, because you've decided it doesn't fit the image of Black womanhood you find palatable today." For the first time, Sherri looked small in her own chair. Her eyes darted to the cameras, then back to Mara. But there was no easy out, no commercial break strong enough to dissolve the tension. Mara's gaze softened just enough to twist the knife deeper. "One day, Sherri, someone younger than you will sit across from you and call your work outdated. They'll look at what you've poured your soul into and reduce it to bullet points in a lecture about what you should have done differently. And when that day comes, I hope you remember this moment, because legacy isn't built on perfection. It's built on courage, and courage means daring to exist, even when the world wants you invisible." The studio was silent, the weight of Mara's words hanging in the air like a verdict. Sherri's lips parted, but no words came. She lowered her eyes to her cards. Her show, her stage, suddenly realizing none of it was enough to shield her from the truth sitting right across from her. Standing up from her chair, the movement was fluid despite her age, carrying the grace and authority that had made her such a commanding screen presence for decades. "Mara, please, sit down," Sherri said, panic creeping into her voice as she realized the interview was about to collapse into disaster. "Let's talk about this." "We did talk about it," Mara replied, unclipping her microphone with the calm precision of someone who had been in front of cameras her entire life. "And what I learned is that you're more interested in tearing down the past than building up the future. What I learned is that you think Florence Johnston was an embarrassment instead of an inspiration." "I never said she was an embarrassment," Sherri said desperately. "You didn't have to," Mara replied, her voice carrying the kind of finality that cut through the air like a gavel. "Your questions said it all. Your assumptions said it all. Your complete lack of preparation for this interview said it all." She handed her microphone to a stunned production assistant and turned her gaze directly into the camera, her voice soft but steady, weighted with dignity. To everyone who found strength in Florence, who saw themselves in Mary Jenkins, who understood that these characters were revolutionary for their time, thank you. Your understanding meant everything then, and it means everything now. Then she turned back to Sherri, who sat frozen in her chair, her eyes wide, searching for words that would not come. Next time you want to have a conversation about representation and legacy, Mara said, her tone sharp with the same wit and steel that had made Florence Johnston unforgettable. Maybe actually watch the shows you're criticizing. Maybe understand the history you're judging. And maybe remember that the women who came before you deserve respect, not lectures from someone who clearly hasn't done her homework. With that, Marla Gibbs walked off the set with her head held high, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a speechless host, and one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. The cameras kept rolling as Sherri sat in silence, staring at the empty chair where one of television's greatest legends had been sitting just moments before. What was meant to be a celebration of Marla Gibbs had instead become a masterclass in how quickly respect can turn into confrontation, and a stark reminder that the fight for dignified representation continues across generations. What do you think? Was Sherri right to question the impact of these classic characters? Or did she cross a line in how she approached the conversation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from the world of entertainment.